Vielleicht haben Sie jetzt wirklich. So, good morning. Good morning, everybody. We are really excited that we really meet here, because it was last week when the new Corona rules came. I was really looking, would it be able to meet or not? It was a little bit unsure what does it mean. So we are really happy to have you here in person. Not that we are now sitting at home and watching the streaming and somehow this online version, which we got used to it in the last months, but it's really great to be in person, and it's such a nice meeting with all of you now to see your faces and bodies, not just the names and the email correspondence. So it's really exciting. So welcome in Prague. We are really happy to have you here on our second symposium on public festivity on ritualizing in Corona times. I was really happy Ingrid asked me came with the idea to give the hand sanitizer to the place where the holy water is. So if you have any other ideas like this, please come with them. We would love to include it in our days. So now you know the beginning of each entering our secret place is to sanitize your aura or whatever you need to sanitize, so you can. It's prepared there. And I would like to introduce you our team. This is Martin Pehal, who is from Religious Studies Department, and not at all, he is as well one of the founders of Velvet Carnival, as you will hear later. So we try to do academic, but as well some practical, ritualistic, whatever, but mostly of us do. And then I would like to introduce you Alessandro Testa, who is from, how to say it in English?
Faculty of Social Sciences.
Oh, thank you. And he's as well author of a great book on carnivals, which you can find on the table. And I am Olga Zitlarova, as well from Religious Studies Department, and as well one of the founders of Velvet Carnival, if you make a little bit better. And exactly, thank you. So your cooperation works really well in many ways. And then I'd like to introduce Bara and Maria. They both are as well from the Religious Studies Department and now helping us with the coffee breaks. As you have seen, that we have to go for the coffee break to the fourth floor, because the chapel is beautiful. It's from the beginning of the 20th century, and for some reason it's not possible to drink or eat here. So we have to ritually move all the coffee break things to the fourth floor. So Maria and Bara will help you with everything there and with all the organizational stuff. So, Martin.
Right. Now we would just like to give you a brief background as to the idea of the whole symposium or conference or whatever you want to call it, because there are dozens of conferences on rituals. There have been lots of conferences on ritual and Corona, and and we would like to introduce to you the concept which we have, which hopefully will sort of supplement these other conferences. So the idea is to create a framework or a platform where not only academics who study stuff and then come and talk to each other about it, but also all the other groups who are actually involved in coordinating, organizing public festivities of any type can gather, right? So even though there's still a lot of us academics right now, in the future we would really like to have a balanced groups of organizers, maybe even people from like business side of festivals, academics of course, participants who don't organize but participate, and we would like to shift it from like these PowerPoint presentations to more interactive type of maybe workshops, performances, hopefully, we have some already planned for the weekend. So, but still, in the future, we would like to make it more balanced. So this is the overall idea. I'm not aware that there would be a framework like this that would annually take place. So this is sort of the place where we want to fit in with this. And we're excited that we're here at the beginning. Hopefully it'll grow in this way. We would be honored if you would actually think about it this way and possibly give us suggestions throughout the year, send us emails with ideas, which is actually one of the other things we would like you to do during the weekend. Two things. First of all,
have a good beer.
Yes. Enjoy your stay.
Roasted up.
That's the first thing. Think about the format, right? Think about how we're seated here. Think about what we are going to be doing here. And at the end, on Sunday, we'll sort of have a talk, and we would like to elicit ideas from you how to change the framework, right? We're sort of still stuck in our academic box, so if you come with anything, how to change it, we would be grateful for that. We will also send out a form, but you can just talk about it, we'll record it, or just make some notes. And that's in relation to the symposium. And then we would like to, another thing is, and I have to share a screen so the people watching live can see it. Okay. Right. What we're doing with the symposium, we would also like to work with it online, outside of the symposium framework. We've set up this website. It's called Ritualising. It's in collaboration with Barry Stevenson, who couldn't attend. He's from Canada. First of all, they had a hurricane there several days ago. Second of all, it's still problematic to travel overseas. He more or less set up the website. It's called Ritual in Motion. Imagine not only rituals in motion, that means bodies moving through space, but in any sense, rituals which change, right? So it can also consume the
every ritual can be the category.
Precisely, yes. More or less anything can fit there. However, what it does right now is that it functions as an encyclopedia so far, more or less only as like this. So you have a map, and you have flags, and you can, okay, here it is. You have flags, and you can click on a project, on an example of ritual, and it gives you basic information. Zineke, that's Brussels Festival. You have links to websites, organizational websites, and other information. Right now, as it is set up, people can co-build the map and publish either videos or their own articles. So there's an application. If you click on it, it guides you through. And this is intended to sort of enable crowdsourcing. There's so many things going on. We can't do everything ourselves, and it makes sense for various parties to sort of join in. Now, why I'm saying this, we would also like to expand in the future functionalities of the website. Right now, it works like this, but we would like to gather input from different stakeholders in public festivities, how a website like this could actually help them practically with what they're doing, right? So if you're a researcher, what type of data you would like to have there? What would be useful, right? For example, network, if you need informants, if you need to talk to people, people who are willing to submit their contacts, would that be something you would like, right? So for organizers, would you want to have a social media platform where you could organize your group, and it would be all on the site, so it would be connected to it. I don't know, because I can't, it's difficult for me to imagine all these different positions. So if you would be willing to think about this as well, and then at the end, give us a few ideas. Gradually, we hope to expand the functionalities of the website, and that we can do only in cooperation. Right.
And as well, we would be happy if you could transfer your presentation from the symposium to an article or commented photo gallery or any format you like, and we would be happy to publish it on the website. But it's not that everyone has to do it, but we would be happy if you like to.
Fine. All right.
Alessandro.
So since we are running late, and I think yesterday everybody heard my voice enough during the tour.
Thank you.
I will keep it. You're welcome. So I'll keep it very short. I would just like to, first of all, to thank you and Martin for involving me. This was your project, and I accepted your invitation. So I'm kind of an outsider, but I also think that so far our collaboration has been quite successful, and so this proves it. And also to thank our beautiful speakers and colleagues and friends that were so kind to take the risk to travel in the times of Corona to the symposium. And for some of them, this has been the first academic conference or event outside of their country in 1.5 years. So I wish you all, and especially those that have been in captivity for so long, to enjoy the conference in the city of Prague during this weekend. So thank you.
Right. So, the program is located at the back. We forgot to say there's a table with books and materials you can have a look at. You can actually take some of those, but not all of it. So we sort of have to figure that out as well. There are programs, programs as well. So you can, but mostly, okay, you already have them. All right, fine. There are some changes which we there are some changes because some people had to cancel it the last time, so there might be a bit shifting, but we'll sort of inform you about that in for every section.
I think the biggest change is that Ilona Vojencová couldn't come for the last time, and so her presentation tomorrow will not take part. We decided to move Martin's presentation from today till tomorrow because today is very full, so we have some more space tomorrow. And some of the presentations will be online, like from Jack Santino, who couldn't come in the last moment as well from from Joanna, which I know she's watching online, and from Vasiliki Sirakouli and Aileen Deland for tomorrow, so those will be held online.
Yes.
I'm sorry those participants can't be here. If they're watching, we are greeting them. It's pity we can't spend the lunch and coffee breaks together. I'm really happy that we are here, all of us. Okay, so enjoy the day.
Aurélie, I'll pass the stage to you. And
thank you so much for having me, Olga, Martin, and Alessandro. Despite plenty of academics and plays in world history, there is still scant literature on what happens to festivals when physical intimacies are available. So I believe this conference is a great opportunity to launch into that much needed conversation. And I'm therefore extremely pleased to chair this first panel. More generally, I'm very much looking forward to discussing the recent transformations of public festivity with such a distinguished group of scholars. I wanted to meet some of you for a long time. Now, first to speak this morning is Laurent Sébastien Fournier. Laurent Fournier is Professor of Social and Cultural Anthropology at Côte d'Azur University in Nice, France. He's published dozens of articles on traditional European festivals, including one in the first issue of the Journal of Festive Studies, in which he outlined the scholarly turn from European ethnology to festive studies, precisely. He's also published many books and book chapters on leisure and tourism, as well as official ethnological reports. This year, he published a wonderful little book with French publisher Armand Collin, Anthropologie de la modernité entre globalisation et fragmentation, globalization and fragmentation towards an anthropology of modernity. In today's presentation, he will use his observations on the French festival landscape since March 2020 to answer at least two of the questions raised in the conference's call for papers. What other kinds of ritualizing emerge when the collective public forms are lost? Should these forms be seen as mere temporary adjustments or as signaling a long-term transformation of collective belonging? Now, just before I give you the floor, Laurent, please note that the Q&A session for this long morning session will take place after we've heard all of the talks in order to allow for a comparative discussion of the various ways in which rituality has been handled and redefined during this pandemic. So Laurent, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Thank you for the presentation and thank you everybody. In fact, I proposed a title for this talk, Resisting the Pandemia through Festivals and Rituals. But maybe the notion of resistance is maybe too strong if we think about the art of resistance in James Scott's books and the issues linked historically to this concept of resistance. Indeed, resistance is a strong political notion. It constitutes an affirmation of the counterpower of the weak against the powerful. However, in the case of the pandemic, it's rather the strongest who resisted, and the weakest, well, they got sick or they died, maybe. In addition, resisting the pandemic has not been easy. It often consisted of passive resistance in a dramatic context of health insecurity. However, there was resistance first to face the cancellation of festivals and to live without them, and then to imagine alternatives and to invent new modalities of collective celebration. That is what I wanted to speak about today. Several difficulties have arisen in considering the problem of festivals and rituals in time of pandemic. One of these difficulties is the question of the modalities which were taken by this so-called resistance. Another difficulty arises from the variable definition of festivals in the contemporary world. The situation is different, indeed, in the case of old festivals, which had a real popular and traditional basis for several generations, and in the case of more recent festivals, which are more objects of marketing and communication, which bear commercial and tourist issues and generally consist in what Hobsbawm and Ranger call inventions of traditions. There are therefore significant differences between the case of old festivals and that of recent commercial festive events, although all of these different events have suffered the pandemic undoubtedly. But rather than insisting on the different types of festivals that existed before the pandemic, I would like to focus here today on the different methods of resistance that have marked the news of the past 2 years. I will therefore focus on different situations, festivals tiny or intimate, clandestine parties, ephemeral parties, framed parties seizing every possible opportunity to maintain a threatened sociability during the pandemic. I would also like to propose a chronology, because for the last 2 years, there have been different phases in the popular reactions to the possibility of partying. And I must say that I too, as a researcher, have gone through different phases in my questions. Finally, I would like to point out that the exercise is not easy because anthropology, social anthropology, is not necessarily intended to deal with the themes of immediate current affairs and with actuality. So the starting point that I would like to take is the publication of the inaugural issue of the Journal of Festive Studies in 2019, a new journal which Aurélie shares. And it's a new journal in which I have given an article whose main arguments I would like to recall here. In this article, I approached in a synthetic way the historical transformation of traditional festivals into cultural resources, a movement which has been characteristic in the past few decades. First of all, in this article, I reminded that festivals, although often disregarded as non-serious and unimportant matters, had nevertheless generated a whole set of theories by some of the most prominent scholars worldwide. By retracing the history of these theories and the ambiguity of the notion of festival, which at the same time fascinates and always appears as threatening for the public authorities, I indicated the changes and the progressive evolutions of the concept of festival by following the work of Jeremy Boissevin, a Dutch anthropologist, from rituals traditionally repeated in local communities to newly created events made to attract tourists and visitors according to a new logic of the economy of services. This movement is very powerful, and it has been asserted for more than half of a century, increased by the economic crisis since the 1970s, and the desire to support small or peripheral places. Are not the festivals a way of boosting the local economies and therefore a possible alternative to the sinking of the global capitalist economy? Since 2003, UNESCO has been fully aware of these issues, distributing labels to many traditional festivals under the Intangible Cultural Heritage regime. Likewise, the last decades have seen the creation of hundreds of festivals, which allowed a revitalization of local economies, involving local producers, but also artists, and the whole communities, the population, including the tourists and the visitors. In the article I'm referring to here, in the first issue of the Journal of Festive Study, I asked several questions about the differences between traditional rituals and newly invented festivals. A problem raised by this new category of festivals is that they keep the same name, festivals, they present themselves as festivals, but they do not adhere to the values traditionally associated with festivals. For instance, where are spontaneity and transgression to be found if the festival becomes a staged event? Where can gratuity be found if the only objective of the festival is to make money? Is there not a shift from festival to spectacle if the event is passively consumed rather than actively engaged? This type of questioning had become very familiar to us in 2019, 2 years ago. The field of festive studies seemed to flourish, and it could extend the worlds of the anthropologists to festive studies and to the festivals. We met here ethnologists, sociologists, but also economists, performance studies specialists, social geographers, historians, cultural studies specialists, etc. But that was before the pandemic radically changed the facts of the problem. So before talking about the different means of resistance that I have identified since the start of the pandemic, I would like to come back to my own situation. For more than 20 years, I have devoted my ethnological investigations to traditional European festivals, their transformation, their heritage, their staging, and the characterization of their political, economic, aesthetic, and social issues. The first lockout in the spring of 2020 clearly deprived me of my own research objects. I have to say, looking back, it was a difficult experience. Locked in my home with only permission to walk an hour a day in the streets of my neighborhood, I could no longer think about the situation of festivals objectively. The reactions at that time were very different between those who were undergoing the lockout and those who, due to their professional obligations, were not. For several weeks in April-May 2020, the notion of celebration seemed to have become unreal. The summer school I was to attend in June 2020 in Siena on the occasion of the Palio Party had been transformed on an online event. The party itself was cancelled and we had to adapt our methodology, preferring interviews to field observations. My colleague Fabio Mugnaini from the University of Siena transmitted to us with great optimism the traditional songs of the Italians on their balconies. But for my part, I was deprived of my object of research and I could not think it anymore. To deal with this situation, quite significantly, I wrote a textbook on general anthropology that Aurélie mentioned, which appeared this year, but which leaves very little room for concrete examples and ethnography and is rather a review of scholarly literature. During the summer of 2020, however, the improved health situation made it possible to organize more parties. The standards were very cumbersome, and there were many requests for authorizations to be filled, and public participation was very limited. I have attended a few concerts organized by small activist associations in the south of France that have supported musicians and artists who had been unemployed for several months. However, all the official holidays were cancelled that year. The first interviews I was able to do indicated different possible directions for research. At trade parties or commercial festivals, the organizers relied heavily on mail order to sell their products. The parties, the festivals, which had been just one marketing tool among many, was no longer successful, and it was therefore no longer needed. French wine producers, for instance, were abandoning the festivals and falling back on some other means of communication. In traditional festivals, which had less commercial stakes, we preferred to cancel and to meet in small groups without an outside audience, so as not to take so much risks. Things changed in the fall of 2020 with the second lockdown in France and the new curfew rules. In this new situation, it was the beginning of the holiday season, of the end of the year. The government in France, quite awkwardly, said that people could celebrate Christmas, which is a family holiday, but not the New Year's Eve, which is seen as a holiday of friends and of the youth. This idea, this proposal from the government, drew a lot of criticism from the people and led to the start of a true resistance movement, which continues today in different protests in the streets. On January the 1st, 2021, a great clandestine rave party brought together 3,500 people in an industrial estate near Rennes in Brittany, west of France. The police fined the participants and sentenced the organizers to heavy sentences, considering that they endangered the lives of others by bringing people together. During the month of January 2021, the few political demonstrations which remained authorized had clearly festive events, clearly festive aspects. Each protest, each demonstration was an opportunity to party and turned into a rave party. But you had to end the parade and to go home at curfew time in the late afternoon. On the markets, in the shopping malls that remained open, excessive alcohol consumption was observed on the part of people who enjoyed tolerance for a takeout before 6 p.m. Another highlight of the festive resistance to the pandemic was in Marseille, the organization of a large alternative carnival, bringing together 6,500 people on Sunday, March 21st of this year. In this city, the traditional carnival is organized by militant leftist associations. In this city, run by the right wing, social problems have accumulated for several years, culminating on November the 5th, 2018, with the collapse of two dilapidated buildings in downtown street, Rue d'Aubagne, which caused 8 deaths. This collapse sparked immense emotion against poor housing and in favor of greater social justice. The Marseille associations organizing the 2021 Carnival were also firmly opposed to the gentrification project of the central district of the town and to new urban developments. They were also accompanied by artists in resistance who occupied theaters and cultural venues in the cities to draw attention to their precariousness in the context of the pandemic. The Marseille Carnival sparked very violent reactions from the political class. Participants were called irresponsible to spread, they were the people who spread the disease. Arrests have taken place and revelers have been sentenced. The third lockdown in spring 2021 recalled that parties were prohibited but did not calm the popular revolt, which is now regularly expressed through anti-vaccine or anti-health past speeches. However, from June of this year, a number of parties could take place. The attitude of the organizers varied. Some of them preferred to organize their party even while complying with the strong organizational constraints that it implies: verification of the sanitary passes, individual testing, limited gauges, open-air shows only, etc. Others choose to cancel their holidays for the second year in a row. The situation is difficult to understand even at a local level, because each actor is subject to the legal regime of authorization requests. Even in the case of municipal holidays in villages, some cities choose to maintain the holidays, the festivals, and others to cancel them. The reactions are very variable. It would be interesting to put these choices in relation to the political options of the different places. What we can observe is that on the left, many choose to protect the population and therefore they find themselves banning the festivals, and on the right, many are more liberal and they allow parties to encourage economic recovery, which is quite paradoxical regarding the political tradition of more condemning the festivals from the right and authorizing them from the left. Regardless, it's interesting that the pandemic didn't stop the festivals. After the first period of bewilderment that I experienced in the field in the spring of 2020, I was able to start my investigations again in the fall. First by phone to survey a few informants who were organizing parties, and then from Christmas on, the party became a major social problem in a context where young people were massively locked in their homes. The media began to take an interest in the party issue. They took up the official categories which distinguished between essential activities and non-essential activities, and the question was asked in the media, is the party something essential? During the first half of 2021, I was repeatedly approached by journalists who asked me about nightclubs, about the psychological impact of lockdowns, about the cultural importance of the parties, etc. It can be said that, paradoxically, the pandemic has made people more aware of the importance of festivals. But at the same time, it is an economic and cultural sectors that has greatly suffered during the pandemic. So I would like to summarize here some arguments that I offered this spring to the French press. It is also an opportunity to come back to some modalities of resistance that I have observed. In wondering if the party is essential, I wanted to recall some of its traditional social functions. I also wanted to ask if a society without parties is possible or thinkable, and what could replace parties in a situation as dramatic as that of the current pandemic. From a pragmatic point of view, I wanted to identify the alternatives that had been favored by people when they were deprived of the festivals. How to party in the context of a pandemic? Of course, not all holidays were affected in the same way or with the same intensity by the restrictions. Internal celebrations within the family group, limited to a few people, were generally able to take place. Likewise, intimate parties such as wedding anniversaries, Valentine's Days meals, or romantic dinners are not prevented as long as they are organized in a private setting. In these examples, it is going to the restaurant or going to the cinema that is prohibited, but not the celebration itself, which is mainly the business of the couples. A first solution, therefore, consists in organizing tiny parties, very little parties. With friends, it is still possible to feast at the home of one of the guests while avoiding exceeding the prescribed gorges. Paradoxically, the curfew has even reinforced the festive characters of certain evenings by prohibiting returning home before the next morning. Another solution, which joined the first one as an adaptative process, was to organize supervised parties in accordance with the legal provisions. Unlike the previous case, which slips towards spontaneous celebration, this is about maintaining an official organization. Immediately after the first lockout, during the summer of 2020, various groups took initiatives to declare parties or concerts to municipal and prefectural authorities under the guise of associations. The organizers of these parties testified to the difficulties encountered, the thick authorization request files that they had to submit, and the various measures they were taken to take for the distribution of meals or for the seating of spectators, for example. Later, and it continues today, concerts were given in different places in front of an audience who could medically certify that they were not infected by the disease. It seems likely that the dissemination of vaccines will lead to reproducing this type of experience, despite the sorting it operates in the population between authorized people and unauthorized people to enter in the festival sites. From a slightly different perspective, which amounts to bypassing difficulties rather than adapting to them, new fleeting festive occasions have popped up here and there, using every pretext to socialize, drink, or smoke together. Thus, in the middle of the afternoon, it was not uncommon in Paris last spring or in other provincial towns to find groups of people assembled drinking wine or beers. In accordance with the usual logic of the holiday, this involves making the most of the tolerances regarding takeout trade during Christmas markets or around certain cafes. This minimal sociability, diurnal due to the imposed curfew, intensified during sales period in shopping malls, but also in some garage sales or on the occasion of authorized political demonstrations. Finally, the most radical solution was to provoke clandestine gatherings, with as such give rise to police repression for endangering the life of others in view of the risk of contamination involved. So different modalities, organizing party on a microscopic scale to circumvent the prohibitions on gathering, or strictly supervising parties to admit only people who are vaccinated or are not contaminated, taking advantage of the margins of tolerances by making maximum use of the authorized circulation time, or going underground. Here are 4 different ways to party I have identified during this pandemic. Is it time to stop? Maybe. No. I have more.
I'll keep that for the discussion.
Okay. So, yeah, well, let's leave it with these 4 modalities I have identified during the pandemic. Thank you. Sorry for.
Very helpful talk. I will now introduce our second speaker, Sarah Pike. Sarah Pike is, maybe I should go back to the desk.
I'm just setting up the presentation, sorry.
So Sarah Pike is a professor of religious studies at California State University, Chico, where she teaches courses on American religions, ethnographic and historical methods. Her research has focused on ritual studies and new religious movements, and she's written numerous articles and book chapters on contemporary paganism, ritual, the New Age movement, and the Burning Man Festival. Her most recent book, For the Wild, Ritual and Commitment in Radical Eco-Activism, was published with the University of California Press in 2017. Today, she will analyze the virtual turn that Burning Man Festival took in 2020, using her interviews with designers and participants to assess the event's ritual effectiveness and meaning. The title of her presentation is Weaving Avatars, the Work of Memory in Virtual Burning Man Rituals. A very enticing title. So Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Arlie. And thanks to the organizers. It's really a pleasure to be here. Just never been to Prague, and it's been wonderful so far, and everybody's been so welcoming. So I'm going to put a few things here. If I was getting ready to attend Virtual Burning Man at my desk at home, I would be setting some of these things up. Unfortunately, sorry, Olga, no costume. I would be wearing a costume, but I'm in the process of moving, so everything's packed up.
But you have a virtual costume.
A virtual costume, yeah. I'll say something about this.
Okay.
Objects. All right. Well, of course, I had to change my presentation a bit, so I've got to read it on my iPad. Let's see how this works. Let me just kind of open it. All right.
So the one which is streaming is okay, Sarah? Is it?
What's that?
The one which is streaming the presentation, is that the actual one? Which
The PowerPoint? Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't change that. I wasn't going to send you guys another one, so, okay. It began with solemn drumming, then the drumming stopped, and Burning Man's temple was set on fire. I watched this memorial temple for the dead burn and listened to the crackling flames and the near silence of thousands of people watching and crying. All the photos, letters, and other remembrances of dead loved ones they had offered to the temple during the previous week were burning up. But we couldn't smell the smoke or breathe the dust from Nevada's Black Rock Desert, where Burning Man, a transformational festival, had taken place every September since 1990, until 2020, the year of COVID-19. As the temple burned on the final day of Burning Man 2020, thousands of people around the world were looking at and listening to their computers. Some were gathered in Zoom to watch together, others were alone in front of their screens with the chat open, or on the screen together in their avatar bodies. Many wept. One participant told me he had to remove his headset, his virtual reality headset, to wipe away all the tears. Based on 20 years of ethnography at Burning Man, including 2020's virtual festival, this paper will compare the virtual festival to the physical event, focusing on issues around memory, embodiment, spatiality, and temporality. And I'm only going to briefly mention the 2021 Burning Man, which was also virtual, and it just ended on September 7th, so I haven't had time to really incorporate it. Through a variety of embodied practices that elicited sensual memories and emotions linked to past experiences at Burning Man, participants transposed the face-to-face event in the distant desert to the intimate spaces of their living rooms and offices. In so doing, they created a separate festival space at home. At the same time, they transgressed the typical bounds of a festival space set apart from ordinary life, and I'm really talking about transformational festivals here, by taking ritual activities into the communities where they live. In this and other ways, the virtual festival became more enduring than the temporary physical event that disappears every year. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time, let's see,
Just the tab.
oh, just the, what'd you do? Oh, just the arrow? Oh, the arrow key, okay.
Okay, just the, or even tap the, just tap the trackpad. Sorry.
Okay,
Okay,
they'll use the arrows then.
or the arrows are fine as well.
There we go. Thanks, Mark. Okay, so Burning Man began in 1986, and it's one of the most established and longest running of a number of annual transformational festivals that attract the spiritual but not religious. And my research is mostly focused in the United States, but this is going to have some relevance to other parts of the world as well. So these participants come to Burning Man from around the world, although I should mention that currently Burning Man organizers insist the event is not a festival, and we can talk about that. At the last Burning Man in Nevada in 2019, about 80,000 people gathered from more than 25 countries, and that's the last physical Burning Man, I should say. Burning Man is now a global movement with new gatherings that have spun off from the original event all over the world, including Dragon Burn in China, Africa Burn in South Africa, Mid Burn in Israel, and many others. And this is from the 2016 Burning Man census. If anything, I would say the spiritual but not religious category on the right at 45.8% is probably larger now. And if people are interested in the religious composition, we can talk a little bit about that. But this is an important statistic in terms of American religion and the secularization and, in general, study of the unchurched or the nuns in the United States. So this is an aerial view of Black Rock City, which is the city, the temporary city that's established in the Black Rock Desert in Nevada every year before COVID. And when Burning Man is not there, there's nothing. It's an empty desert. It's dust, basically. No plant, very little plant life or animal life, but there is some. The temple I'm going to be talking about is kind of the biggest structure you can see to the left in the kind of middle of the circle there. So for many burners, as participants call themselves, Burning Man's a spiritual destination, and they often use the language of pilgrimage to talk about their journey to the festival and their journey at the festival. They contrast Burning Man to the default world, the other world outside the festival boundaries, and they do all kinds of practices to really separate life back home from festival space. They travel many hours. This desert is not anywhere near any cities, some small towns. It's a very remote area. So the journey to get there is an important part of the experience, traveling through these empty desert landscapes. And then when they arrive, they usually wait in a long line, so this is part of the journey, behind many cars and trailers and vans of other people. When they get to the gates, they're greeted by costumed participants or nude participants, and there's a kind of ritualized process that they go through to enter. And then when they enter, of course, everything in Burning Man looks different than the ordinary world. So people are dressed in costumes or nothing at all. These are just a few, and you can find all kinds of interesting images online, wonderful photography of the event. No one's allowed to drive around unless they're driving in an art car. So there's all kinds of creative ways that cars are dressed up as well as human bodies. So if Burning Man is really set up to be a contrast to life back home, with my bag. Oh, I'm just thinking water, but that's okay. If Burning Man is set up as a contrast to life back home, then really the temple is at the place where that contrast is most condensed. So this has been the main focus of my research, this temple that's established for the dead. And the first one was built in 2000. I've been studying it since about 2001. Burners see this temple as a place that, like the event in general, provides opportunities for transformation that aren't available anywhere else to them. To facilitate grieving and to underscore the transitory nature of the temple, oh wait, let me just go back there for a second. Every year the temple looks a little bit different, so these are all different variations because it gets burned on the last day of the festival, so it can't be reconstructed exactly. Within the temple, there are many altars. It's covered with messages for the dead. You can bring anything you want. You can do anything in the temple that you want except to destroy it. So throughout are these messages and letters and photographs and material objects. So to facilitate grieving and to underscore the transitory nature of the temple and of Burning Man itself, it is burned on the last day of the festival. So all these altars and photos and mementos that people have left are reduced to ash. The temple burn is the closing ceremony. You can see one of the temples on the left there, and then on the right, of course, is the crowd of people sitting quietly as the temple, and often crying or praying as the temple burns. And yet everything is not gone. Burners carry home a rich storehouse of sensory experience in their bodies, the smell and taste of dust, the faces of all the dead, reflected in thousands of photos affixed to the temple, the sounds of quiet music playing in the temple, or the whispered prayers of other burners. So in the spring of 2020, most transformational festivals, at least in the United States, were canceled. But Burning Man organizers, instead of canceling, decided to go virtual. Programmers and digital artists quickly developed these online venues, including those around the temple that would facilitate ritual activities online. Participants created and experienced sacred spaces and rituals through their avatar bodies, while their actual bodies were wearing virtual reality headsets and sitting in front of computers. The theme for Burning Man 2020 was the multiverse, and it took place on these different platforms. There were 8 of these universes, and they all involved different kinds of technical applications. Not very good with computer technology, so that part of it was interesting and challenging, but you had to download applications for each of these worlds. As well as being on these different platforms, there were also a lot of Zoom events and in-person events that people took into their local communities. Just quickly, these were some characteristics of Burning Man, the physical world, that I wanted to see how they would translate to the virtual festival. And probably the most important one was the ways in which burners found it challenging to not be leaving their homes and going away to this festival apart from ordinary life. As one burner put it, the 2020 event seemed too easy, too connected to everyday life, and it lacked the extensive preparation, the travel, the hardships of living in the desert for a week. So in order to create a sense of the virtual event as this kind of place apart that you had to travel to, burners came up with all kinds of ways to mimic the actual physical event. So one of the things was the journey to get there, of course. So you're sitting at your computer. So there's the technical journey, which I wasn't the only one that struggled with that. That could take many, many hours to try to figure out the technical aspects, which for many people include a virtual reality headset, which I did not have. Then, when you came into this, so this is Black Rock City virtual reality. This is a digital view. You can see how it looks similar to the aerial view that I showed you. When you arrived in Black Rock City, the virtual reality world, you waited in line, and then you came into the desert. The floor of the desert was cracked and parched, very similar to what it would have been. So the designers really made an effort to make it look very much like the event itself. And many burners did comment in chats and other, oh, thanks so much, Martin. A bit of a water bottle I left over this. So many burners did, oh, it's really good. Jet lag is my own excuse, okay. Many burners commented on how real it felt to them, this digital world. And even though they didn't travel to the desert, the physical site itself the site of the actual desert, remain very important in a number of ways. And some of these are embodied by my objects here, which I'll mention in a minute. There were a lot of similarities. So typically, these are my goggles that I usually wear at Burning Man. It's very dusty. Dust storms can make visibility almost impossible. The dust gets in your eyes, so you're going to put these on. You're going to wear a mask, of course, and this is before we're all used to wearing masks, right? So you wear your mask. This is a very fancy outfit here on the left. And then in 2020, we're wearing masks everywhere. Here's your virtual reality headset. So again, some of the similarities just in terms of the way people were dressed up were pretty similar. Many people did put costumes on, and again, that's what I should be doing right now, wearing my Burning Man costume as I'm talking to you, as I would be if I were sitting on the screen or had my virtual reality headset on. People also dressed up their avatars in their burner gear, and so that was one of the ways. So I should mention that a lot of the burners that I talked to that really were able to fully participate in the event were video gamers or computer programmers and people that are very comfortable in this world, as well as some newbies like myself. Okay, so burners dressed up their physical bodies at home and their avatar bodies on screen. They even evoked the desert setting with dust, which is an essential element of the physical Burning Man experience. People always end their messages with like dusty hugs, right? Because the dust gets in everything. Even my objects, which I've had for a few years now since Burning Man, they still have dust in them. So some burners place dusty objects or jars of dust next to their computer, again trying to create that material link to the place itself. Dust and memory were particularly important in making the event look and feel realistic to burners. In one of the universe's virtual dust storms even shut down the computer screen, your screen would go completely blank, just as if you were at this kind of whiteout that happens in the desert sometimes. And then at the temple, here is one of the physical temples on the left, and this is 2020's virtual temple on the right, and I'll show you a slide of this year's in a minute. But participants' inner histories of memories and emotion were particularly important in creating a powerful experience at the virtual temple, and that's what I've been focusing on. Memories of many altars seen in past temples, the smell of smoke, the closeness of other bodies, came back to them during the virtual rituals of the temple. Many burners interacted with the virtual temple the same way they had with physical temples. As a Burning Man organizer described it, this is a quote, "The temple is a digital structure made of photons and imagination that we can all visit, place offerings within, and gather around for the ceremonial burn. The building won't be real, but the gatherings and messages and loss will be." All right, this is not a very good image, but this is the temple this year's temple on the left and a little bit of the website around the temple. A number of burners shared to me the ways that they ritually differentiated between their home space and the virtual temple. Some meditated before visiting the temple, some burned incense. One burner energetically cleaned her home before and after going into the temple online. And these embodied practices really help to facilitate this transition from the physical space in one's living room or office to this virtual festival world. Another aspect was the kind of meditation that was shared by the temple volunteers called the Temple Guardians. This is a group that I have mostly been working with in my participant observation at the event. So this was a meditation that could be shared. Most participants experienced the virtual temple through layers of memories. As Luna, a temple volunteer, explained it while visiting the virtual temple, she remembered the body sensations, and this is her language, of being in the past temples. As she put it, it's like a muscle that gets flexed every year that was ready to get to work. Some burners found that this virtual temple enhanced rather than diminished their experience, so physical accessibility was a considerable benefit that was often mentioned to Burning Man 2020. As one observed, quote, "No one was judging anyone by their appearance, we were avatars. There were no visual cues to create conscious or subconscious bias." Others mentioned that this was the most accessible Burning Man festival ever. Another aspect that was mentioned as being an enhancement was the presence of sound. It's not, there's lots of sound in Burning Man, but this was a more intimate experience of sound as you're sitting in your room in front of your computer. Offerings to the temple could include audio files, so you could hear someone reading a letter to their dead loved one, or playing a song for that person. Some burners reported that because of sound, the virtual temple allowed for increased intimacy, rather than the distance one might expect at a virtual event. Sound and vision, such as the talk between avatars and all of the messaging, text messaging of different kinds that was going on, played enhanced roles in the 2020 event, while touch, of course, was much diminished. So avatars had severe limitations in terms of touch. Typically, when you go into the temple itself, it's a very physical experience. There's a lot of touching and hugging of strangers and friends, and this was one of the ways that burners were very frustrated with the event in their avatar bodies. So when the temple was burned on the last night of the festival, as I described at the very beginning of my talk, the temple held 3,141 offerings, such as letters, photos, songs, and the offerings were viewed over 40,000 times. For some participants, the virtual temple burn was beautiful and powerful, even an improvement in some ways over the physical rite. Luna, one of the volunteers, recalled that, quote, "It felt more personal, more internally significant." Immediately after the temple burn, most traces of the virtual temple were erased, and this follows Burning Man's, one of its main mottos of leave no trace. On the night after the temple burn, I joined about 100 other burners watching the digital artist take apart every component of the hard drive on which the temple offerings had been stored. As he was doing this, he said, "It's just parts, but noting what's encoded on it," he said, really made it more than an inanimate device for him. This hard drive is one of many examples of how technology enables connection in a time of isolation. Phones, headsets, and computer screens were animated with desire for connection. Coyote, another temple volunteer, told me that he received alerts on his phone whenever anyone uploaded an offering, like a letter or photo, to the temple. And he started to think of these phone buzzes, quote, as the living, breathing heartbeat of the virtual temple, end quote, connecting him to this global community of burners. Both animating the devices necessary for the virtual experience and invoking memories of the material presence of the physical event were ways of materializing the virtual festival. All right, so in conclusion, on the left there, all right, this is some melted glass covered with dust that came out of the ashes of the temple, which is what you see on the left. This is my Temple Guardian pin, and this is my Temple Guardian bandana. So again, all these things might be
Can you see
fitting.
how it looks like?
Can we pass it around or no?
Sure.
I
was just worried. I don't care. I was just
I don't want
worried.
to desecrate anything, Sarah.
And what do you do with this scarf?
Yeah, so this is my Temple Guardian scarf. That was from
Scarf.
2008.
Nice.
So everyone who volunteers at the temple would get this scarf. They'd also get a little ankle bracelet with a bell on it to distinguish them. And I can say more about the Temple Guardians, which are kind of these caretakers at the temple. So let me offer some conclusions, because I think I'm about out of time, in fact, exactly out of time. So this case study is situated at the convergence of scholarship on online religion and online rituals during COVID, and studies of virtual worlds like Second Life by anthropologist Tom Goldstorff and others, studies of pandemic religion, such as the work of Carola Loria, touch on issues of memory and embodiment that I've mentioned, but most of these tend to focus on live-streamed events and the performance of rituals over Zoom, perhaps. But at Burning Man, the avatars were also doing ritual in virtual worlds, as well as physical bodies sitting at the So the avatars were doing ritual, as well as these other activities that are more typical of online pandemic religion. For many burners at the temple, 3 bodies were involved in rituals: the avatar bodies, the physical bodies sitting at the computer, and the remembered bodies that had experienced the physical event in the Black Rock Desert. Each of these 3 bodies involved different menus of sensory involvement. So more generally, Burning Man 2020 was diversified and enhanced spatially and temporally. It was extended spatially into devices like computers or cell phones, and it was also extended out into people's neighborhoods as they went on costumed bike rides, or they set up theme camps to give away vegan ice cream in their front yards, or they set up bonfires in their backyards to burn the things that they couldn't bring to the virtual temple. And so in these ways, it really transgressed the boundaries between festival space and ordinary life. as well as sharpening those boundaries in some cases. Burning Man was extended temporally when some of 2020's virtual worlds did not disappear at the end of the event, and some of the Zoom activities continue to happen every week, and I have some examples of those which I won't go into. To make it all more complicated, just 2 weeks ago, Burning Man again took place virtually in the same worlds as 2020. However, at the time, same time as the virtual event, there was an improvised, unofficial, aggressively unofficial event of about 25,000 people that took place out in the desert, the Renegade Burn. Speaking of resistance and festivals. I watched the virtual temple burn online at the last day of the festival, and afterwards I watched a live stream of the small temple burn at the Renegade Burn, the physical site, along with many others that had attended both the temple burns on their home computers. In the online chat, among those of us that were watching the physical burn, one burner commented, "After 11 years in person, watching on my laptop was the best temple burn yet." And another added, "This may be the most beautiful and real temple burn I've ever seen." In these and other examples, and they weren't joking, in these and other examples, for some participants, the virtual rituals were described as more intimate, more real, and more meaningful than physical rituals at past Burning Mans. All right, thank you. I'll pass my little guardian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for this extremely stimulating presentation. And since we only have 4 speakers up here in this first session, we're actually going to have that coffee break now, and then we'll listen to our 2 last talks of the morning. So how long is the coffee break?
Should be
30 minutes?
30 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
30-minute coffee
Leave
break.
the 5 minutes of coffee break for coming back.
10 minutes before 12.
10 to 12.
welcome back. Let me introduce our next speaker, Jos de Groot. Jos de Groot is a member of the Sharing Arts Society, which organizes an annual parade/procession in the city of Utrecht, in the central Netherlands. A parade or procession that honors both Saint Martin, which is the city's patron saint, and the United Nations. So every year, the Sharing Arts Society chooses one of the 17 goals of the United Nations as its theme. And what he'll share with us today is the story of all the conundrums that organizers of public events have been faced with since March 2020. So what type of creative, improvisational solutions did the SAS offer? What were the biggest challenges that the organization faced when trying to change an established framework? What insights were gained from the experience? So Jos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Aurelie. It's not bad for an introduction, considering that I didn't give any prior information to Aurelie, so she did that. Thank you for the invitation, Olga. It's nice to be here and I'm happy to share our experience with you all. I hope it's to our mutual benefit. I personally am interested in the relation between the daily practice and the theory, because we as in the daily practice, we tend to think that the event we organize is the most important event of the world, or at least in the city of Utrecht. And sometimes it helps to have an objective view about the importance or the meaning of what we're doing, to have some estimate of what we reach. We asked the research group in Utrecht to follow us since last summer till 2022 to evaluate our working method and see if we achieve our goal of reaching all inhabitants of the city of Utrecht. So it's a relation between our working method and our outreach. In 2022, in Utrecht we celebrate 900 years of city rights, which is a very big celebration. And we as the St. Martin's Parade are the end of the celebration on November 11th. So there is some additional funds to make this research possible. I'll be the business manager of the Sharing Arts Society. I work together with Paul Veld. Paul Veld is the artistic leader. He was here 2 years ago. He did a presentation, so for the people who were here 2 years ago, you might hear some familiar things. It will be necessary to tell. Is the arrow not working?
No, it is.
Okay, now it is. Now it is. Thank you. The first half of my presentation will be about the St. Martin's Parade up to 2019, because you need to understand what we are doing before I can tell you about the adaptations we made for 2020, and of course for 2021, because we're facing the same situation as we did last year, more or less. Let me first start with Sharing Arts Society. So I told you Paul Veld and myself are the sort of the board of directors of the Sharing Arts Society. It sounds fancier than this, because we are both freelancers, and we work for the foundation Sharing Arts Society the whole year around, about 1.5 to 2 days a week. The whole organization consists of freelancers, so we work the whole year. I think in the beginning of May we started growing the team. So by the summer we are with 6 to 8 freelancers, and up to November we grow until 20. And on November the 11th, day of St. Martin, we're back to 2 again. So that's how it works. We don't have any fixed costs, which is important because that makes us flexible and makes it possible to adapt to different situations. We rent a very small room for our administration and that stuff, and we rent a storage room for our materials. So this is our goal. I don't think you can read it. Sharing Arts Society is active in the city of Utrecht and starts from the simple conviction that all inhabitants are part of the community. That they share the city and its public space. We organize events that underline this common ground and create a contact zone. We use storytelling and art to involve people and invite them to bring their own values or identity into the scene. In this moment, I would like to stress common ground. It has a figurative speech, so it's the shared future they have, it's the shared opinions and shared views. It's also a literal meaning, which means it's the ground we stand on and we share that ground. And our analysis is that we tend to retreat in our own bubbles. So in society we have a bubble for the highly educated, for the poor, and for the elderly, and the young families, and they don't meet anymore. So we need It's our conviction, you need to find a place where they meet, because it's a necessary condition for them to share their future. So you need to meet to share your conviction and talk about it. That's where we start, and actually there has been some development since the last 2 years, because Sharing Art Society was founded just to make the St. Martin's Parade possible. But in the course of the past 7 years, with this mission, it became political mainstream. First we were outside, we just organized an event, but this sharing thought has become political mainstream. So we are asked as a foundation also to think about the earlier mentioned celebrating with the 900-year city ride, but also about other things. So we write plans for other people to see if the working method we developed can help other people celebrate their events. Just to give you an impression, I'll show you a short movie. It's the 2019 after movie. It takes about 3 minutes. And I'll give you an impression of what it's all about. Control. Oh yeah, better. Getting back to my presentation. Okay, so clearly the director's cut only having smiley faces. It is a little bit like this. So the light sculptures are the core or the basis of the parade. We parade through the inner city of Utrecht, which is about 2,000 participants, about 10,000 people alongside the route watching. Inside the parade, it's not only light sculptures, but we have all sorts of performing arts, you saw dance, you saw theater, you saw other sculptures and clownery and all sorts of things. So also Chinese dancers, which I will tell a little bit later on. Yeah. And how we see this parade as a work in progress. So it's a continual, somebody earlier told me rituals are also developing all the time. So that's how we look at the parade. So it starts with the story of St. Martin. I don't know if you're all familiar with it. St. Martin was the bishop, the Roman bishop, that cut his robe in half and gave half of it to a beggar at the entrance of the city of Amiens, somewhere in 400 after Christ. And this act of sharing has become the symbol of the city and is the patron saint of Utrecht. And so you see this red, which is the upper robe of the bishop, and the white, which is the undergarment of the bishop, come back in, for example, the logo of the University of Utrecht. But also in the t-shirt of the FC Utrecht, which is our local professional soccer team. You see it on different places. We also have, so I said here, material and immaterial, tangible and intangible heritage. We have this more tangible heritage, which is a relic of a piece of skull of St. Martin on a shrine in the museum of the St. Catherine's Convict, which is a museum about religious heritage in the Netherlands. And they have made this whole about St. Martin and the way we celebrate it in Utrecht. We also have a statue somewhere in the city. You see stories about the story of sculptures in the churches of the story of St. Martin. So you see it in several places. But also we have the immaterial, the intangible heritage, which starts from the Middle Ages, where people, poor people could go around November, door to door to ask for spare food from rich people so they can last through the winter. That transformed in the years after to what we nowadays do little children up to age 11, say 12 maybe. Having a lit lantern and go door to door, sing a song about St. Martin and ask for candy, which is more or less the same idea. We took this, because it's not everywhere in the Netherlands that they have this tradition on St. Martin's Day. Utrecht has a very strong tradition, and in the north they still have it, and we took this tradition as a starting point for developing a central celebration of St. Martin's Day in the city of Utrecht. Starting point was the celebration of the Treaty of Utrecht in 2013, we originated this celebration. As you can see, we celebrated quite a few things in Utrecht, which is very nice. And this Treaty of Utrecht was about 350 years remembrance of the first European peace treaty that was made in Utrecht in 1600 something. Now, that's where we started. We took this lanterns and this light as the starting base. So we started with just one classroom, I think, singing a song with only lanterns and the mayor, what's this, Heising Vlag, I don't know English. You know, you put your city flag up in the top of the pole, and somebody has to bring it up. Okay. And slowly over the years it became bigger and bigger. So not one classroom, but then several groups and then people from outside. And then we tried to start it 4 or 5 years ago when Utrecht became underlined Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. We decided to take every year one goal of this Sustainable Development Goals as a theme or inspiration for the parade. So it has every year it has a different meaning. So that's one way to develop it. Instead of parades, it always have the same. We have St. Nicholas. I don't know if you're familiar with the tradition. But St. Nicholas comes in and he rides a white horse and he has his black pleats, which I'm not really allowed to say anymore because it's not woke. But and they come in and the parade is always the same. We want to be developing and changing. So apart from choosing a theme, we also look at artistic development of the parade, and we do that from a certain perspective to enhance the involvement of the Utrecht people. So instead of inviting people to look what we do and you can participate in what we do, we ask them, what would you like to add to our parade? What would you like to do if you were in the parade and with this theme? What would you like to add? And we sort of target sometimes specific groups. So if there's not enough young people participating, we add dance to the parade. So we go to dance groups because we know there's lots of young people, street dance, etc. And we say, okay, we're open for your suggestions and please join us. And then they sort of gradually, first year one group joins, and the second year two, and we grow a little bit that way. So if we develop, the artistic development goes hand in hand with the search for representation. That's one of our core things because we say we want to make this common ground for all inhabitants of Utrecht. We are really very short, because how do we work? We work with a swarm, we call it the swarm of birds, where it's not actually clear who is deciding which course we are going, but it's clear that the whole swarm is taking the same course, because they look at their neighbors and see what's happening. So that's sort of the image we have. We work on the basis of co-ownership. It's Nicholas told us about commercialization of events and parades. We want to prevent that. So it's a high trust relation we have with our swarm. So there's no money involved in our relation, because we reimburse costs and we help with materials, and maybe with an artist to help them compose the presentation. There's no fee involved, and on the other hand, they can expect from us that we're not making money over their backs. Is that English? Anyway, it's Dutch, literally translated to English. So we use their presentation to make money for ourselves. So it's not done. There's no commercial representation in the parade whatsoever. So you cannot buy a certain space in the parade to show your product or make it. So it's a non-commercial and actually also a non-touristic event, because it's for Utrechters only, more or less. But since Corona, I changed a bit. The other ones, forget most of the time, with art as a safe space might be an important one to stress, because we are a little activistic, but not political. And art is not political. It's a safe space where you can share your convictions without creating debate or argument. And you can just show what you're about, what your origin is, without somebody questioning why is it your origin, why do you feel this way. So it gives you a safe space, and everybody can just show what they're about without any hassle. Yeah, it looks like this. You saw this. I'd like to present it as also a sort of illustrious image. This is the goose. The goose is part of the story of St. Martin, and under the wings of the goose you see all sorts of people. So the first one is one refugee from an AZC, which is a refugee center. We work with refugee centers to make some of the sculptures, and they come and be out in the open, which is not very common in the Netherlands. I unfortunately have to say, they stay in their AZC most of the time. You see elderly people, you see young people, you see everybody that participates. The common ground is the main reason of our existence. We faced a serious problem in 2020, because all the events were banned, and it started in the Netherlands mid-March, and it lasted till the end of April. That all social activity was banned, so we were not allowed to go anywhere, and everything was closed. And onwards to the summer, it became a little bit better. But as we chose Sustainable Development Goal 1 as our goal for 2020, which is a ban on poverty or a battle against poverty, and we made a new connection with the Poverty Coalition in Utrecht, which is a coalition of all the parties that are professionally or voluntarily engaged in these poverty issues. We really quickly decided we have to do something, and not determining what we have to do. As we said in April, no matter what, we're going to do something. And the funny thing is, was everything was closed, and we were actually the first ones to say we are going to organize something that released a lot of energy in our swarm. Everybody said, oh, thank God we're doing something. In the municipality, who is funding us, where all of a sudden there were extra funds, because we had to go and look for different ways of involving our audience. There was extra funds. In the artists, of course, because they had the whole calendar empty, and not knowing when it will be full again, which is still not full. Now it starts a little bit. So it gave a lot of opportunity, and everything. I mean, nobody was working in the event sector, right? Nobody, no technician, no audience, nothing, no venues. So everything was available for us at low costs. And so we said, we're going to do it. Oh, it's so nice. Yeah, please come with us. That was a really benefit for us. Other benefit is that we discovered things that we're going to use in the years afterwards. I'll come to that later. Big thing of Corona is, of course, audience control. So if I'm telling you there's 10,000 people coming from all parts of the city to the city center, there's no way of us controlling how many people there are and if they leave each other enough room. Because we have this 1.5 meter society. I don't know how it is in other countries, but you had to keep space for somebody else. You saw the movie, there's no way to do this. So we had to think of a way of presenting the sculptures and the performances by not moving through the through the inner city, and which was actually quite simple. We turned it around. So we looked at a big square in Utrecht, and then we said, okay, the performances and sculptures will be like an open air museum, spread out over the square. The audience will go and walk a route, and alongside all the sculptures and performances, which was easily said, a bit more difficult done, but we actually have to think about time slots, which the audience has to not all come at the same time, they have to be spread out over evening. You have to make a calculation about the square meters of your square and how many people are allowed in at the same time. You have to think of, like in the Vatican, and the people saying, please move on, please, you have been long enough here, there's other people, please move on. You have to find a way to make it, to do it in a gentle way and not being like a police. And the same impact with the smaller audience, because what Nicholas also said, poor people tend to be the first victims if something goes wrong, which is also the case here. And it's about financial problems, but also about social uitsluiting. Yeah, that you don't participate socially because you don't have money and don't know where to start. So we had this event just to involve them and invite them and mingle them with other groups. So how would we do this? What would be the possibilities for participation? And one thing that came back is to make our website a virtual meeting place. Like the Burning Man example, we failed in this aspect. And not in a slight way, but in a total way. That doesn't really matter. So we came with the round of St. Martin, Cloud St. Martin, instead of the St. Martin's Parade. So it's the open air museum. Look like this. And we came up with an activation campaign. So how do we involve the people that they participate in the parade or not in the preparation of the parade? We made it share your life, share your story, share your wealth. Share your wealth, be care for your city, which is below. Share your light is easy, because light is the core of our parade. If you cannot walk in the parade, you can make your own light at home. And so we made little parcels with a bit of paper and a bit of tree and glue and a candle and an instruction how to make it at home. And then you can use it in your own St. Martin, because the children are still walking past the doors on the 11th of November. Our parade will be a few days before. And use, or you can hang it at your doorway and show that you're sharing light. We have a story bank, which actually I think in Dutch sounds much more promising. But it's a place where we gather stories from people that lived in poverty and overcame it, or are still living in poverty, and telling about the problems they face during their everyday life. And this story bank would be some sort of inspiration for what we then thought would still be the round of St. Martin and the sculptures that were made. We use it differently at the end, you will see. And then the donation platform, Care for Your City. So if we have seen that there's poor people in Utrecht, and it's a very common problem that...
You've got 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Perfect. We want to make people share their wealth. You can give money, and it will actually help your citizen next door. And share it according to St. Martin in half. The half is going to an organization that uses the money to help people, and half is going to us, who's sharing our society, to organize events in places where poor people live. So we go to them instead of asking them to come to us. And very short, we had a very careful summer. I don't know about you. It was all going well. So we could work and do the preparations, and there were not much regulations, and everybody could do what they planned to do for the round of St. Martin. But then we had the autumn coming, and the pandemic rose again, and all outdoor events were forbidden. So the round of St. Martin was off the table. And it was 3 weeks, I think, before the actual date. Then we decided, okay, we're going to make a movie. And okay, that was easy. We rented the venue, which was empty, of course, so we could get it cheap. We had this venue, and we would ask all the groups that were to perform to this venue, ask them to play 1 minute, take it, and make a recording of it. But then, I think 4 days before the actual date, we were starting for this filming. All groups were prohibited to perform, to rehearse. So groups bigger than 2, all groups. brass orchestras or choirs or whatever, we're not allowed to sing together or to perform. So we had to make changes there, and we only did duos and trios. We still have 2 minutes, I think, but we're very short. This is the name of the thing. You see our horse. This is what the sculpture is made. It's a group of hands. It's made by the masterclass we have. We do a masterclass with one artist and about 10 people who are really interested in exploring the technique. They make the most beautiful sculptures every year. So I'm going to show this. This was possible, children under 12 could see. This is one of the guys who lived in poverty for quite a while, and David tells about it, which is part of it. And it's of course a very simple image. If you ask children about poverty, which will come up with the story of Cinderella, the pumpkin carriage, and it's all made by us into a documentary, 55 minutes. And I'm going to, you can look at it if you like. It's in Dutch, and broadcast it on local television. So what took me here, we're very quickly going to broadcast the next round of St. Martin on the local television. We make a short movie at 15 minutes, because our reach is much bigger. We got very positive comments in this document. We are keeping the story bank, because it's a very valuable aspect of what we're trying to bring to the audience. And that's what we do the round again, because regulations tend to loosen on one hand and then tighten on the other hand. So we need to regulate our audience next year as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this interesting case study and this different grassroots perspective on disability. Our last speaker is Michael Fuchs. Am I pronouncing your first name right? Michael.
Yes. Michael
Fuchs is a sub-project coordinator and president of the managing board of the Fastnacht Museum Schloss Langenstein, Museum of Carnival in Hadolzell am Bodensee, a German town located at the western end of Lake Constance. Today he will tell us about the way Hadolzell residents, many of them carnival enthusiasts, reacted to the restrictions put in place by that city during Fastnacht 2020 and 2021. Both
2021.
2021. And whether such resistance should not in fact be seen as part of carnival tradition in a way. So, Michael, I'm very much looking forward to what you have to say on this topic of resistance, which we have already hinted at earlier.
Dear audience, the intangible cultural heritage Carnival, recognized by UNESCO, is repeatedly banned in Central Europe. From this, however, strategies have always developed that have kept Carnival alive to this day. There were also bans during the current pandemic. The question I am investigating is, how did the Carnival customary deal with these regulations? Have they followed the rules, or did they rebel? My observations relate to a part of Germany that has special historical carnival customs. This is mainly about the southwest of Germany, also similar phenomena can also be observed in other European regions. Characteristic for the participants is the wearing of masks made of wood or other materials such as fabric, paper, metal, clay or wire. White is a wire mask. The costumes wearers are characterized as the fact that they do not change their disguise, but use it every year. In some cases, particularly valuable specimens are inherited over generations. It is the so-called Schwaben-Alemannic Carnival, or in German, die Schwäbisch-Alemannische Fastnacht. The actors in this area are called fools, or better said, jesters, because in Austria, fool is a very negative connotation. Even if many firmly believe in keeping an old tradition here, an alleged continuity since the Middle Age cannot be proven. In reality, most carnival customs were almost extinct by the end of the 19th century and were revived, reinterpreted, or simply reinvented in the course of the Romantic time or afterwards. This photo shows Chester in 1871 from Rottweil, Black Forest, who were not allowed on the street due to the carnival ban and therefore found time to be photographed. In some cases, customs declined due to continuous carnival bans because the authorities were suspicious of all too free, uncontrollable people and festivals at all times. War, the suffering of the victims, or epidemics were repeatedly cited as reasons for the bans. In order to represent the interest of those practicing custom, to preserve the carnival cultural asset, and, above all, to counteract carnival bans, an association was formed in 1924 in which 68 cities from southwest Germany and Switzerland have in the meantime joined. Other associations followed. The many associations, which now include hundreds of thousands of people, the topic of carnival was given increased weight in the political discussion and many interests were asserted. The example of the first Gulf War shows that the associations have not always spoken out against the ban on carnival. Even if there were protests against the carnival ban in 1991, they submitted to general morality and cancelled the carnival. It was said at the time to celebrate when a war rages in the Middle East and people die. In retrospect, however, other consequences were drawn from this event. It was of the opinion that the holding of customs would be impossible if regional events in the future would take into account of all events in the world. Based on this experience, the carnival ban in Corona times was viewed rather critically by the association's leadership. At Carnival 2021, the associations even issued a joint press release that can be described as an angry protest. It was alleged that the police had put the organizers of the carnival customs under pressure to demand compliance with the strict Corona rules. The anger also flared up because this warning contradicted the Interior Ministry, which had spoken out in favor of cooperation to secure the carnival cultural property. It was also completely incomprehensible to the organizers why street decorations were not allowed to be hung. Because this would apparently increase the risk of infection.
Carnival.
Exactly. In one city, the decoration was already hanging, had to be taken down again by the Carnival Club. It was argued that the street decorations would encourage celebration. A mayor who publicly represented this thesis was attacked several times in letters to the editor and publicly criticized from many sides. The associations feared that such nonsensical actionism would generate anger and frustration and would quickly become defiant reactions that nobody would want. The end, however, the Carnival associations submitted and, as a compromise, held virtual Carnival events on the internet. Officially, all jesters should adhere to the country's current Corona guideline. The guidelines included a 24-hour exit restriction, which allowed people to stay in public spaces only for compelling reasons. Going shopping or to the hairdresser, walking with the dog, or getting some fresh air were among these reasons. The associations pointed out that when leaving the house for one of these reasons, it was also allowed to wear a costume. Here was a hidden hint to use all loopholes on the legislation to keep the Carnival tradition alive. Would the jester understand this message? Would they exhaust the possibilities and defy the laws with a little reluctance? After all, a certain stubbornness has always been part of jesters. The Carnival jester is partly derived from the medieval court jester, who was an integral part of the court. His position outside of the norms applicable at the court allowed him freedom of fools and made the fool a legitimate critic of the authorities and the king. In terms of the history of ideas, not only the figure of the fool flowed into the Carnival, but also the idea of fool freedom. Many Carnival customs are based on myths that are shaped by freedom from fools, revolutionary ideas, or resistance against the authorities. Here are two examples of resistance. The Schutig is a traditional Carnival figure in a red costume, snail head, and varying wooden masks. But let's look back in 1919. All Carnival events in Elzach, in Black Forest, were banned because of mourning for the war, dead, and the time of need. Before that, Carnival had fallen victim to the First World War 4 times. Also in 1920, the government forbade Carnival pleasures of all kinds, as well as the wearing of masks and disguises. For the Schutigs, Carnival was not just a pleasure, but a very serious matter of which, due to its long history, they were proud and which was part of their own way of life and identity. So the bans were ignored, and as darkness fell on February 15 in 1920, the first Schutigs appeared on the streets. A gendarme wanted to arrest some of the costumes people at gunpoint. But their number was too large and the local police did not support him. He was then disarmed and presumably detained himself temporarily. However, the requested police reinforcements the next day. The gendarmerie then advanced with 20 armed men. Both groups collided on a bridge. The shooting slowly retreated, accompanied by a growing crowd. It was not possible to disperse the crowd in the front of the town hall. An official wanted to order the use of weapons in order to enforce the ban on carnival. It should only be thanks to the negotiation by the city pastor that it did not come to extremes and that the state finally gave in and withdrew again towards Congress. The second example that is said to have happened in Ritualising on the Lake Constance takes place at the time of the Baden Revolution, 1848. When Prussian troops occupied the city after the revolution, they forbade carnival. A man called Xaver Deschle, known as Kappe Deschle, you can see the name maybe, I show you the name. Went to the commandant responsible and asked if it was allowed to celebrate Carnival at least at the window in costume. When this was approved, he built a window frame, disguised himself, and, with the great delight of the citizens, jumped through the street with the window frame slung around his neck. So that's a real one today. The two examples are intended to illustrate how revolutionary myths and stories shape the carnival and the idea of freedom from jesters to these days. Similar stories from important building blocks of regional identity in many places. But are they so much part of the self-image of those practicing the custom that they also have an impact on the present? Can those practicing customs be regulated in Corona times based on an old tradition? Back to the Elzach Black Forest case, where in 1920s the police used gun violence against the costume wearers. That's not a shooting. Press event in the run-up to Carnival 2021. Police, mayor and jester organizer forbid Carnival for shootings. Reason and health prevention were anonymously above the centuries-old Carnival custom. However, it quickly became apparent that not all practitioners would adhere to the ban. Several charges were brought to the police in advance, legally confiscated to prevent a corresponding unauthorized torchlight parade. Several people were found at a meeting point and approached in cooperation with the mayor, jesters, council, and the police about the corona regulation and the ban on the event. Around 15 people suddenly stepped onto the main street from various streets, regardless of the flowing traffic. Sometimes onlookers and other people in costume joined this group. In the short term, there was traffic disruptions and closures. 2 minutes? Okay, I stop. Next time. Yeah, the second case, the carpet actually in Ritualising, the jester with the window frame, a symbol of the peasant cunning and recklessness did not dare to go out on the street, which was perceived as a form by many traditionalists. Some fools celebrated in a shop window, COVID compliant, behind glass. Here the motto was looking for a hairdresser. Carnival at the window with a lot of distance. This fool was pushing a cupboard through town that said, "My costume will stay in the cupboard." Since walking his dog was allowed, some people bought stuffed dogs with wheels. Yeah. These are just small examples for very creative actions. Yeah. So, okay, I have to short him. Yeah. So this example bear witness to an overwhelming resistance in the carnival? Rather not. Well over 95% of those practicing the custom stayed at home and obeyed the law. However, this carnival could not be compared with the ban on carnival in the First Gulf War, because in the COVID carnival human lives were directly endangered. This has led to a strong sense of responsibility in many people and prevented them from taking to the streets. But the creativity, which makes up a big part of the carnival, was not lost despite the prohibitions.
Thanks a lot for this enlightening discussion of resistance and tradition as both timely but also timeless. So first I would like to offer thanks and sincere congratulations to the speakers for providing us with such fresh insights into the effects of the current pandemic on public festivity, and also for abiding more or less to the 20-minute limit. Now, before I formally open the discussion and take questions from the floor, allow me to perhaps draw together some of the major themes that have been explored by our 5 panelists. So far, we've heard of the search for festive alternatives in the wake of the COVID pandemic, and of the necessity of improvising to adapt to constantly changing rules and edicts. Laurent Fournier discussed clandestine, illegal parties a little bit, and the games of cat and mouse with the police that ensued. But most of the alternatives studied by our panelists involved the use of computer screens and sometimes the use of virtual reality headsets. Many, in other words, were of the presentational kind, streamed shows, but some of them managed to produce a participatory performance style through social media engagement. Our panelists explained how this was achieved and what these virtual alternatives meant to both participants and organizers. In other words, whether they satisfied their expectations. Sarah, in particular, tried to assess the ritual effectiveness, but also the emotional and aesthetic success, to a certain extent, of the virtual Burning Man. Another interesting theme that emerged from your papers was the overbearing presence of the past in all of these virtual alternatives. Many of these happenings elicited a sense of nostalgia. They did not so much create new heterotopias as act as surrogates. And this process of surrogacy, which performance scholar Joseph Roach saw was crucial when discussing circum-Atlantic performance cultures, may actually have made absence even more present. At the same time, people imagined future festivity as a liberating moment, deferred but not forgotten, and they promised the greatest festivity of all times in 2022. Waiting, in other words, was a major theme of 2020 and 2021 public festivities. French anthropologist Emmanuel Lallemand recently observed that because it is both a promise and a source of worry for the days to come, festivity right now is mostly experienced as a projection. For now, festivity is biding its time. The irony, of course, is that the ephemeral may well turn out to be long-lasting. Finally, Laurent and Michael introduced another theme that I consider essential to our collective discussion: resistance to these alternatives and to the new normal that they promoted or embodied. One issue that I think hasn't been touched on enough yet is the impact that the pandemic has had on people's research and work. And I'm not just talking about the changing methods that the pandemic may have fostered, that is the move towards virtual ethnography, netnography, but also about the way you have personally addressed this fundamental, disturbing question: is public festivity essential to a community after all? 2020 and 2021 have presented us with an exceptional test case for this long-held belief. From what I know, no nation or community has exploded due to the lack of festivity during the pandemic. So should we interpret this as a sign that the benefits of physical health, which festivity can, in this particular case, threaten, trump the psychological benefits of public festivity in today's world? So, also, when one's research or one's work is rooted in festivity, that is, when people have a personal stake in seeing it happen, does this not create a bias? Are we not tempted to look at events that have survived, albeit in a temporary virtual form, rather than at what has been lost through outright cancellation? What do these many, many cancellations tell us about contemporary festivity that survivals do not? So I just think these are questions that we may wish to think about as we listen to the rest of our speakers. But now let's have this, not 30 minutes now, I'm afraid, 20-minute Q&A session. I'm sure we have plenty of questions for our speakers, but for the sake of clarity and courtesy to other participants, please make sure you ask a maximum of 2 questions at a time. So let's hear those questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, maybe we can sort of move more to the front. The microphone will detect, if you speak in the back, it will detect it, but it's sort of, the sound isn't that good for the people who are watching online. So if you want to speak, maybe just move a bit to the front. There's some space over here. We can sort of make a circle around here.
Yeah. Maybe those who want to ask a question.
Yeah, sure. Or you can just come up, or you can really move. You can have like a campfire sort of setting. So,
you summed it up so nicely. One more thing that occurred to me is that also there must have been many public festivities that sort of went ahead in some form, and that actually caused or were blamed for a major spread of corona. And that's another thing that happened, and I think maybe especially in Holland, like corona was blamed on carnival, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so people coming back from skiing, and then before they knew it, they were all
spreading the virus.
yeah, dancing together, and then that became the area in Holland where there was most corona in the beginning. It was not the capital or anything, but it was this countryside place where they had carnival. I saw also in my own the festival I was working on that there was so much worry that, but imagine that if there is some kind of spread, will this festival be like discredited forever, or how bad would that be? So I guess that's another point to think about.
Sarah?
I guess this question it's kind of for everybody, sort of a general question, but I was struck by what Laurent said about the reversal that happened when the left was associated with festivity originally, and then now it's become associated with the right because it's this sort of expression of freedom or whatever. And I guess what I'm really wondering, and this, for the other cases that we heard about, especially from the organizers, is about continuity and change, and what's, and the past and the future, what's going to change because of what happened during COVID. I mean, I think for a while I get the sense, oh, we're just waiting, as Arlie said, or we're just trying to mimic what we did before. But in fact, there's these new forms of ritual creativity that have risen that some of you describe, and certainly are in my case. And I'm wondering, and Laurent's case too, politically, what's going to change about these events as moving forward? That's going to make them different than the rituals that they had before.
Maybe it's a question of accessibility. In Holland, we now have the Corona Check app, and you have to show it every time you join other people in activity. Not everybody is enthusiastic about this app, so people who are banned from those activities. And that's a question we don't know how to handle, because we are heavily funded by the municipality, which means they have to abide by the regulations. There's no discussion about this. So it's not on the one hand really our problem, but on the other hand it is our problem, because that is the group we want to involve in our
Sorry, just to clarify, I'm curious also about positive changes, not just restrictions. So I'm wondering some of the creative examples that you described, but I think also you did, like some of the positive changes, will they continue as well as the restrictions?
They will, because we are full of movement. We invented some new ways of celebrating, and here the evaluations that they were.
So the events themselves have now been shaped in some
We have two different parts of Carnival. One part is the free Carnival, everybody can do what they want and wear what they want. And the other part is the strongly traditional, and it has every year the same celebration. That is strongly traditional part.
Two separate.
Yeah. So I can take the story bank as an example, where we set up as getting traffic to our website. So we launch the story every week, and then we put in social media, watch this new story, it's on our website. Nobody. They all only came to our website 1 week, 2 weeks prior to the event. But then we use these stories in the documentary. So, and then they appear to be a valuable aspect of this business documentary. And I think our reach expanded to 150,000 people who watched this documentary. And they all got to see these stories. Okay, so that's two things we should keep. Stories, no matter if people go to our website to keep the stories, and we keep this broadcast. So then you expand.
I think it's an interesting view, of course, to consider whether these events or these gatherings must change and how they will change and so on and so forth. But I think the biggest question is how people will change, how we react to meeting other people, how we interact with each other. And I think from my point of view, I think that's the most fascinating and possibly also the most interesting question, how people will change and how their view on what we are doing and how we facilitate it will change. That will, of course, give us reasons to change the events, but there is a change. And everything must change. That's one of the few things we know, besides death, of course.
Thank you. I will be on the video, that doesn't matter. There was an element which was obviously very acute in the presentations, and in fact, what the Corona did is it sort of reinvigorated the rebel side or the protest side of the carnival itself, because big carnivals, more or less, they are like subsumed, co-opted by either commerce, which I don't think is bad necessarily, right? I think we could talk about the role of money in these things, and I don't think commercialization is necessarily evil. Right? Obviously, it's very important, but the coronavirus actually reinvigorated this rebel side of the carnivals, which I think got lost in the past, at least in liberal democracies, where people are sort of they can do a lot. So you lose this completely, and all of a sudden it becomes again an anti-system, anti-structural element. And that's why, I mean, the police, the confrontation, so it's all back there. In a sense, it's absurdly returning through this. So yeah.
But I guess it would also depend on the motivations of the people who resisted, so to speak. Because did they see themselves as champions of the right to party under any circumstances, or as just heirs to a tradition, like defenders of a dying tradition? Or, I mean, you would have to examine the motivations.
Do you think it matters, though? Do you think? I understand the motivations might be different, but in effect. No, of course you have to. I mean, you have to ask them. But I wonder if the different motivations matter. I mean, they're doing the same thing, right? Regardless of the motivations. So
just a tweet.
I see Alan.
Yeah, but also agree with Daniel, or see it as perhaps too close to the main event, Corona, to already describe changes in the tradition itself. It's more focused on the people, how they change interaction, or what I see or spot sometimes is that people rethink, why is it important to me? Why do I have to be part of it? Is it really necessary for my life? That could lead into, is it only pressure, expectation for the broad public to be part of this tradition? And that could lead perhaps into another crisis for the tradition, less participants, leading to a second round effect on the tradition itself, because it has to reinvent or change. And that could be perhaps within 5 or 10 years, we see big changes.
Yes?
Yeah, so rebellion, it all sounds very attractive and so on, but I also think about, so we should be really careful not to overemphasize it. And because most places it was simply cancelled, as you said, 95% of people just dropped it, and then you have these cases like the Dutch case where okay, there were some people who resisted, and now they just look like utter fools, and Carnival has suffered a lot. Its reputation has suffered a lot because it's this place where these fools go and get drunk and die of COVID. I mean, so what resisting? I mean, you're just stupid. And I guess that there's more of that has been going on in 2020 than like, yeah, he resisted and we love him for it. Yeah.
No, I wasn't talking about like it necessarily being positive, right? No, it's just resistance as such.
Yeah.
If I may add something to what Martin said, I like this suggestion because indeed it marks like a transformation in what Carnival is supposed to mean in European culture or Western cultures, the idea of transgression or resistance. But actually, apparently, it seems to have acquired a different structural or even structuralist sort of meaning or function, because in normal times, Carnival should be the time of transgression and the exceptional time of ritual. And now we're living in exceptional times. People want to do it actually to renormalize it, to reestablish that normality that was negated or denied before by Carnival itself. So there's like a double relationship of, or sort of binary relationship that seems to tell a lot about the way Carnival is being reinterpreted and refunctionalized even in times of exceptional circumstances like those that we are living in now. And it's interesting in the long term, in the long durée history of Carnival to see that this comes back. In the past it was, we also have periods in the history of Europe during which for one reason or another, either exceptionally or normally or usually Carnival was prohibited. But that's not always also entangled or triggered this process of retransgression of what was supposedly not transgressive before. So I think in this respect there's this interplay at work. But it's maybe as Aurélie said, no society or community has fallen apart yet because of the lack of public activity, but at the same time...
Let's play the devil's advocate.
Exactly, but at the same time, it's been only 1.5 years of this, and who knows if prohibitions had continued for years, or will or shall continue for years, what could happen? Like, that's a question.
But I guess I'm wondering how, I mean, what I'm hearing everyone saying, and maybe in the US it's a different situation, is everything was canceled, nothing happened, but then I'm also hearing people did things at home. People, I mean, so I guess I'm just curious, did it really not happen? Or are there all of these ways that people still celebrate it? I mean, wasn't it proof that it was essential in some sense, but maybe not, I don't know.
I was going to say a bit of the same. I mean, the question that Laurent posed, is party essential? It's two ways. Is it essential for the social? Is it essential for the economic functions of the society? And now these two are getting divided. The officially accepted form of celebrating is happening in a certain frame, but like Sarah says, the grassroots celebration, at least what I see in the communities I study, they've gone underground. It is happening, but it's clandestine, it's hidden. And I study mass gatherings. It starts to be a risk factor of its own, being clandestine, but still happening in hundreds or thousands of people, because there has been spread of corona in these events. It becomes more complicated. I mean, and like already said, yeah, not yet. Communities are not being destroyed or broken down yet. But I think it is, we see from the fact that people do party, they just hide it because they have to. We see that it's essential, at least in some form, at least in some scope.
Even here in post-socialist societies, those who work on festivities and public rituals or carnivals, it was very common during socialist times that these would be prohibited, especially in urban areas, not necessarily in the rural areas, but in cities, carnivals and mass gatherings of mass people were prohibited for obvious reasons of state security. And what happened, also religious public rituals, and what happened, like the notion made famous by Chris San, was this privatization. So the ritual life withdrew into the private sphere. Even what was supposedly public was transformed into domestic or private. And we are witnessing this now as well.
Survived decades of
and this survived decades, exactly, decades of not being allowed in the public, withdrawing in the and then going public again afterwards, immediately afterwards. So this is happening. We all know about these micro-transgressions, even ourselves, perhaps at dinner or a gathering at home during COVID times. But there are parties that are being held all the time, especially by the youth. The youth is more difficult to control. And so this is already happening after just 1 year, let alone after decades or during decades of, for example, state socialism in Central Eastern Europe. So this will be an interesting transformation to observe in the next few years, if restrictions stay, to see what level of domestication or privatization of rituality will take place.
So in our region we had hundreds of virtual events with thousands of people, video conferences and social network activities. But I made interviews with gestors after that, and everybody said it has nothing to do with the carnival. Carnival is to be together, to touch people.
Yeah.
No, it's not accepted.
In a way, it was a carnivalesque environment here, from street to home. So even this inversion is in sync with the carnival mythology of inversion. Does it really work? Another question. I had a question for Sarah. You described Burning Man and its normal manifestation as a transformational festival. So would you use that label to characterize the 2020 and 2021 virtual
Yeah, I would, because people still describe their experiences in that way. I mean, it's a label that's constantly used to talk about a certain category of American festivals, and I think beyond the US as well. Mostly events that developed in the, sort of around the turn of the 21st century and last 100 years, although you could apply it to local festivals and regular gatherings as well. But I think there was such a discourse of, oh, I'm so surprised I still got to have this experience of, something happened, a kind of liminal experience happened, even though it was virtual. I mean, not everyone had a positive experience. There was a lot of critique and, complaining, but there was still that discourse of personal transformation. I haven't done enough interviews to really know, but I would certainly still label it that way because it was the expectation. I don't know the extent to which it was actually realized, but I think.
So it wasn't just recognition of the past form.
Right.
There was an actual transformation.
Yes, people talk about it that way, though they, as I argue in my paper, I think they still relied upon their memories of the past to have that experience in a virtual setting. So but that also happens in the physical event. So, yeah, so I would still call it that, but I think, I'm not sure, I haven't done enough research to say in any kind of quantitative way how many people would have argued that. Certainly the discourse I'm seeing would be in keeping with that transformational festival category. Yeah.
And I have a complementary question because you emphasize past experience. So was it possible to go to a virtual Burning Man for the first time Burning Man?
Yeah, I have a paragraph that I left out about this. What are the sort of conditions that a first timer would go through? So most people I talked to have been before, but a few hadn't, and I heard some stories, this is really pretty anecdotal, that they really relied on the memories of others. So there were lots of stories about, well, my friend was also trying to get me to go to Burning Man this year, I could go because it was virtual. And so they heard these stories, so they had certain expectations. So in a sense, the memories of their friends then shaped their experience. And I haven't talked to anyone who I'm sure there were a number of people that just came out of nowhere and didn't know anyone, but I guess also, there's so many images and stories online. So if you were thinking, oh, I'm gonna go to the virtual event, you might be looking at those. So again, those shaped your experience and expectations. So for first timers, it was different. There was not the same kind of embodied response. And yet I heard a lot of stories about people weeping at the temple who had never been before. And again, usually somebody's friend that they've been talking to me about festival to for years. So yeah, so that's all I know so far. I haven't, again, done enough ethnographic work.
It's 1 o'clock, so should we maybe close the discussion?
Yeah.
Even though people are having more questions.
Well, at the table.
So if you have more, maybe the question is what will we eat now? Is the most important question now. So for those who ordered the common lunch, so we will go together now to the restaurant Ufleku, which is said to be one of the famous in Prague. Normally very touristy, but because of COVID it became a little local again. And they have a great beer, so you should drink a beer there, but then a coffee so you can continue with the symposium in the afternoon. And if anyone wants to go with us and who didn't pre-order the meal, it's not a problem, just come with us and you will order something what they have. But we just made a big order, so it goes fast. So maybe we can, say that in 5 minutes we meet downstairs in front of the building and we go there together. And for those who won't not go with us to Ufleku,
3 p.m.
At 3 p.m. we start, right? Okay?
Can we leave our things in here for a second?
Yes, you can leave the things. Maybe we close now, and we will open it 10 to 3 again.
Don't leave anything essential, but which you
Not
need
your
outside.
Right?
Right, but it's okay to leave a laptop.
No, sure, yeah, I'm leaving mine as well, so if it gets stolen, mine's on the line as well.
Your stomach, the apparatus, the entire thing. Collection intéressante d'objets, hein?
Like 1 to 3.
Yeah.
Like if it was Norway or Holland, it would be like 30 minutes.
1 hour.
Nothing essential.
We just want to say if someone asks us, then we have it, but we don't need it. No, not for the rest. Já está muito bem, eles têm muito bem. Vamos ver o que ele tem que dar.
No,